Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast and the Jedi Council Chambers. I am UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas and Lord Uther. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome.
Hello there.
As we step forward again into the sandy planet of Tatooine for the next installment in the book of Boba Fett. Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, tell us a little bit about episode 2.
Thank you, Jedi Master UrzaMaster. Thank you, Jedi Master Lord Uther. And thanks to all of you Padawans and Sith out there enjoying our show. Especially a couple of big fans from the Mid-Rim. I'd like to give acknowledgement to Lisa Davis and her son Ethan. They are both big Star Wars fans and Graying Jedi fans from the Midwest. And Lisa's been watching since we had only 60. That's 60 subscribers. So that was many parsecs ago. And we are pleased as punch that we're providing you with excellent Star Wars content on pending rebrand. So thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoyed the show. The Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 2, The Tribes of Tatooine, first aired on January 5th, 2022. The director was Steph Green. The writer was, of course, showrunner Jon Favreau. Green was born in 1979 San Francisco when yours truly was living in the Embarcadero. Studied film in Ireland, and we've talked about Steph Green before because Ahsoka's Part 2 and 3 were both helmed by Steph. And we covered that in our very first Graying Jedi podcasts, episodes 1 and episodes 2 of the Graying Jedi, which you'll find in the archives if you want to go back and see. I think we said very nice things about Steph. Didn't just stick around for Star Wars, though, has directed episodes of Scandal, The Americans, Billions, Bates Motel, Preacher, and HBO's reboot of Watchmen. So has got science fiction and episodic TV well in hand. This episode also has legendary cinematographer, big screen cinematographer Dean Cundey. And Dean has worked with some of the best in the business for many years. Was John Carpenter's principal cameraman for the first Halloween movie, the second Halloween movie, and the third Halloween movie, as well as The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, and Big Trouble in Little China, to name a few. At the same time, he cultivated a relationship with director Robert Zemeckis, and he did Romancing the Stone. He did all 3 Back to the Futures and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And then he parlayed that into working with Steven Spielberg on a couple of early 90s pictures you might remember. Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman in Hook, and Sam Neill, Jeff Goldblum, and Laura Dern in the original Jurassic Park. He then found time to work with Ron Howard on Apollo 13 and Patrick Swayze for 1989's Roadhouse. So Mr. Cundey, he will shoot 2 episodes of this season of Boba Fett, this being the first, Chapter 2. And he's amazing, and his camera work is always state-of-the-art. The other big note on this episode, we have a character that has so far only appeared in Star Wars comic books, never on live action, but for superfans who have read the Marvel series, Darth Vader and Dr. Aphra, you will be pleased to recognize Black Chrysanthemum, a Wookiee bounty hunter who was once enslaved in the gladiator pits and now works for the Twins, aka a brother and sister Hutt. And isn't it great to see large 700-pound space reptilian gangsters being carried through the streets on a litter by undoubtedly stiff-backed servants who bang drums and carry them about as they do their nefarious dealings. Gentlemen, this episode, even more so than Robert Rodriguez's pilot, really kind of sets the tone for what this show is kind of trying to do. Parallel tracks of stories. We have Boba, played by Tamora Morrison, being rescued, if you will, at first possibly enslaved, but later welcomed into an indigenous tribe of Tusken Raiders out in the Dune Sea. And then we have the current story where several cycles have passed, and now he is the daimyo of Mos Espa, a location you probably remember from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which I believe, pending rebrand, is going to be doing a special anniversary broadcast next month. So you definitely are going to want to hear Jedi Master Lord Uther's comments and all of my rebuttals to those comments. That'll be next month, I believe on May 19th. So be sure to be there. It'll be all things pod racing, Gungan, and Sith apprentices. Looking forward to that. But overall, gentlemen, like I say, we have two sort of competing stories here. Boba goes into the Bacta tank. That's the device they're going to use to give us glimpses into the past, as well as, again, the modern crime story. We have the luscious Jennifer Beals, as a club owner with secrets. We have assassins who may have been dispatched by the mayor. We have a Weasley major domo to the mayor. He makes Bib Fortuna look, positively trustworthy with his squishiness and so forth. We have what used to be called in the Star Wars cantina the Hammerhead. I think they're Ithorian is the actual species. I mean, I love seeing these characters plucked from little bits of Episode 4 and beyond, now getting center stage and personalities. And I believe Robert Rodriguez actually did a voice cameo as the mayor of Mos Espa. I believe that's his human voice that we hear being translated. Ming-Na Wen, we have the Jabba's palace locales we're familiar with, the big creaking gate that opens and closes. We haven't seen the little eye that comes out and says Boshuda. But the throne room, the Rancor pit, there's a lot here for Star Wars fans. I think Jedi Master Lord Uther talked about this when we covered the Episode 1 of this show. I think there was a recalibration of expectations in terms of what this show was really going to be about, and I made the argument for the council that this was about the redemption of Boba Fett. And I think Tamura Morrison, from this viewer's opinion, I think he gives us a much more interesting and complex character than just a one-note bounty hunter who took Han Solo from Cloud City and Bespin back to Tatooine. Look at the moment where he tries to teach the Tuskens how to ride speeder bikes. I mean, it's just a fantastic 3 or 4 minute comic montage. The incongruity of teaching these indigenous people kind of how to operate like basic machinery and so forth. And it's emblematic, I think, in this particular episode, Steph Green's direction, Favreau's writing, or so forth. It sets us up and makes us feel something later when they use those same speeder bikes on a daring train heist against the Pike Syndicate, who's been barreling through their territory and shooting at them and killing poor banthas. Goodness. I'm not a card-carrying member of PETA, but I don't like to see a bantha go down in a thing of blaster fire. I mean, that tears at the heartstrings here. So, gentlemen, it's a very Western kind of feel, and I'm sure we'll sound some notes on that, but whether you're watching it for the first time or revisiting it, how are you feeling about early installments of the Book of Boba Fett?
First off, I love Westerns. I love a good train heist. This was a banner episode for me. I was very excited to see, really it's a fistful of dollars in space. It right down to the camera work by Kundi here. You can see it in his shots and his sequences, as he's putting together these things, in congruence with everybody else in the crew. It feels very space western. It's very Episode 4, which is perfect for a Tatooine setting. And it really it brings you in beyond the suspension of disbelief. Like you're not just viewing a show; you feel like you're there. The speed of the train, you can almost feel the wind whipping past you, the blaster bolts ripping past your head. You're really building an emotional attachment, as Boba is in this episode with, our Tusken friends, and not to mention that, but you get the bar fight scene, which takes me right back to Roadhouse, even if you want to think of it that way. It was just. Hands down, if you can separate yourself from that Boba Fett you remember, and just enjoy Boba Fett for who he is in this show, in the moment, if we can somehow forget the BA bounty hunter, and just think of him, like I said in the last episode, as an aging, literally digested version of himself. You get a truly compelling character who's kind of on this secret mission, shall we say, to discover himself and really find his new place in the world. Whether it's going to be the daimyo or if there's something else in the future, which I think the way they're telling these parallel storylines is important. And I've not watched through the entire series yet. This is my first run through. But it really feels like they are moving this towards a Mandalorian style story, where it's going to be part of a much bigger picture, which I think, Lord Uther's expressed, and we've all talked about seeing sort of this motley crew unite someday against, Grand Admiral Thrawn, and somehow reunite Ahsoka with everybody in, the galaxy far, far away, as opposed to the galaxy farther, farther away. I'm excited. I think this is a cool way of building up the Tuskens, which to me feels like an important oversight in Star Wars history. Obviously, they didn't, they were functional characters. They were just supposed to be sort of background there, ruffian types that should present an ever-present danger because it's building suspense. But they're also like people, and they have a very unique history that makes you really wonder about them and wonder about Tatooine before the oceans dried up. And how they've, in this very advanced mechanized future, how they've come to be this nomadic sort of raider people who can't ride speeder bikes. That just, to me, is just mind-blowing. Because you think of the scope of the Dune Sea as most of this planet. They ride banthas through it or walk. So I don't know. I loved it, I think, is the easiest way to put it. But it does feel very much like they're working towards something even bigger than Boba, which is really cool to see. And it feels like a journey you should be on when you're watching.
Yeah, I think the one thing about this episode was, even though you knew that they were going to stop the train, in a sense, at some point, the suspense was still there that, there's going to be some kind of loss and something was going to happen, and maybe there's a slight chance it might get through there, but we had the classic, hey, we could stop the bad guy, kind of moment, which, again, was deserving, and still I feel like it had the, again, the excitement of being able to make that stop, and there was a possibility they could get by. And the other thing I think is really important that we've, again, I can't remember if I talked about this in the other episode or this one, but just the idea of seeing Boba Fett go from an emotional person to a wise person. And I think those are two different things. I think with age, that's the old saying, and I never understood it until the past couple of years, quite honestly, but, with age comes wisdom, and letting emotion go and not letting that control you and drawing upon past experiences. And I think that's what we're seeing with this Boba Fett. And like I've said before, I was expecting to see a Mandalorian type Boba Fett, which even brings me to the question of, is Boba Fett really even a Mandalorian? Because I question that quite deeply. He references, even though, and I can't, it might have been was it in the Mandalorian where, like, he showed the lineage because of his armor? It was, like, on his wrist. Was that a
Yes.
Mandalorian
It was a
episode?
chain code, yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah. So even though he has that part of it, I don't know how emotionally invested he truly is in it. If Mandalore really means that much versus
For Din Djarin.
his own life. So I'm kind of curious. Maybe they're gonna. That's maybe that's part of the bigger picture, right? Like that's gonna play out at some point. There's gonna be a confrontation over it. But I do like seeing that wisdom piece come about. Yeah, and I don't know. Do you guys think he's a Mandalorian? Because I'm really questioning that.
Well, it's weird because he's a clone, right? He's a clone of Django, and it's like
Right.
Django really probably has the DNA familial like things there. But yeah, when you're a copy of something, are you as just as much as the original as you are, or are you allowed to have your own personality? That's actually a very far-reaching science fiction existential morality question there. I love it, Lord Uther.
But I think it goes beyond that. I don't know. Does he really care about Mandalore? Because to me, it seems like he doesn't. Right. But
Right.
but I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
I also want to posit this: is he force sensitive?
Ooh.
Because I mean, we see with Boba, he survived a Sarlacc pit. Through either force of will or force of force, somehow he came out of the Sarlacc pit. I don't think we really fully have an answer to that yet. And even if we do get some otherwise answer, I think it could easily be through not a big leap in writing, transformed into, yeah, Boba's actually somewhat force sensitive, and that's what gave him the abilities he's had, even though he's Mandalorian. Is he the first Mandalorian Jedi? Because that's something that's been tossed about with the Mandalorian, of course, with Din Djarin and Bo-Katan and others. Is like, is there going to be a Mandalorian Jedi? Because as far as we know, there really hasn't been one in forever, if ever. So I really would love to see that be explored in future, whether it's Mandalorian and Grogu or future books of Boba Fett. I also kind of wonder what's his motivation. Why Tatooine? It's sand. It gets everywhere. I hate sand. But it does have pod racing. But it just begs the question, like, what's the point of taking over, especially Mos Espa? It's a location that's important to, the overall series, so it's just convenience of writing, I'm sure. But there's probably lots of other places a guy like Boba Fett could go and establish himself as a power. Like, no doubt he's got respect among the systems. So why here? Why Jabba? Is it just revenge on Jabba for putting him in danger of falling in the Sarlacc pit to begin with? Is it he needs to prove something to himself? Or is it just virtue of the fact that he was rescued by Tuskens and now he feels responsible for them in some shape or form, and he wants to be there to help protect them or whatever? I find it all very compelling writing, and it really makes me wonder why there was such a weird backlash against this show. Maybe future episodes will be more revealing on that, but I think it's good writing. It's not like they're trying to force something. Pun intended.
I see what you did there.
I look at this and I compare it with like a Luke Skywalker in Force Awakens, or not Force Awakens, but Rise of Skywalker. That's a Luke Skywalker like I can kind of understand. Like I could see how it could happen, but it just feels very inauthentic.
I think it's out
This
of place.
Boba Fett feels very possible, very authentic.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step over you.
You're good.
The Luke thing, though, now that you say that, I agree with you. I just don't think that was the time and the place for that Luke in that story. Like, it was two different, do you know what I mean? It's like two different storylines that they tried to mash together and make work. And whether it's, look, you know how I feel about this. I feel like they totally dissed that character. Now, if you would have done the Luke we wanted to see in those three movies, not wanted to see, I think the Luke that the character deserves, of being the most powerful Jedi and all that. And then with the Rey series, he goes into hiding. I think I could have lived with that a little bit more. Maybe she's trying to start up Jedi Academy and he doesn't want to do it again. Whatever. But I could see that being the older, angrier, crotchety Luke versus
Brain.
where, yeah, yes, versus where he was in the sequel. It just felt out of place.
balance.
So maybe that's my complaint. Oh yeah, the Force was not balanced in the last two of those, without a doubt. It would have worked. It could have been done differently in a different order. I agree.
Very cool. Well, real quick before we do our lightsaber colors, gentlemen, we would be remiss if we didn't mention Lizards in the Nose. If for no other reason that this show took 10 minutes and gave us Lizards in the Nose, and suddenly we're in Oliver Stone's The Doors with this weird abstract imagery and drug paraphernalia or whatever. I mean, if I'm going to be addicted to a harmful substance, I suppose Lizards in the Nose is where the direction I might lean. But yes, that was definitely a weird and wacky Favreau throw in there in the last 10 minutes of this show.
But what excellent, like, an addition to the history of the Tusken Raiders, because we talk about how they continue to kind of flesh them out in a sense. So to me, there's a deepness there in terms of how they become who they are, and how they become who they are not these, dopey's the wrong word, but not these aggressive Tusken Raiders that are going about killing people just to kill them. There's like they were portrayed, in my opinion, in the first Star Wars, but it gives them, I think with that religious piece, it gives them, just makes them deeper, like we've continued.
It gives them some mysticism. It's an excellent death and rebirth scene. If ever there was a womb painted on the canvas in front of me on a show, my goodness, the Sarlacc pit, the tree, a womb, this rebirth of Boba Fett, which I think lends itself to why this is a good series rather than the one that's been sort of maligned in the media. He's being reborn as this new contemplative, wise old man Boba versus, the Boba Fett who's just out to make a buck, freezing people in carbonite and what have you, and it removes the vengeance from Boba Fett. It's not so much him trying to get vengeance against the Jedi or, carve out an angry place. He's not the angry teenager Boba, if we want to think of that. I really enjoyed it, and I love a psychedelic trip in anything, let alone in Star Wars. I feel like it's overdue, honestly. But I thought it was brilliant. The idea of a lizard crawling into your brain, though, might keep me up at night for a while.
So, makes you think of Wrath of Khan almost. Do you think this was marketed wrong? Or could they have marketed it differently so you weren't... I mean, all your fans are coming off The Mandalorian going, this is what a Mandalorian is. And the last time I really heard about Boba Fett or his history is, to me, he was kind of the ultimate bounty hunter. So I was kind of expecting to see that. So maybe that was my issue the first time around. So should it have been thrown out there to fans, or maybe even information leaked differently so we would have viewed it? Because again, the second time around, we all make mistakes, except for the Phantom Menace and how I feel about that. But the second time around, I get it now. But it helped to rewatch it. So, sorry, long-winded. Was it marketed wrong?
I think that's a great point. I think if you market the show just a little differently, it hits completely different. If you market this as this is a new Boba Fett, an older, wiser Boba Fett who's been through some significant trauma, you change this up tenfold, and I think you make it much more successful. So, Bob, I know you're watching up there in your ivory Disney tower. You can always hire the Graying Jedi podcast for your ideas in marketing and storyline editing and writing. By the way, we come cheap.
Yes.
Gentlemen, if I may start our ratings today with my Kyber crystal in hand, I don't think it's any I don't think it's any mystery what I rate this episode, but it may be a mystery as to my visual aid. This, my friends, is a 4 megabyte DIM of some EDO RAM from 1991,
Wow.
green,
Wow.
dark green, because I thought this was a fantastic episode. If you want to see more, head over to the UrzaMaster channel and subscribe here on YouTube. For all of my retro technology ways, I could definitely teach me some Tuscans how to ride a speeder bike. Fantastic episode. I love a good train heist. I love a good psychedelic trip. I love the character development. I'm really, really starting to like Timur Morrison's Boba Fett quite a bit. I was a big fan of him as Django. Frankly, they're knocking it out of the park for me right now.
Oh, Uther.
Lord Uther, you're muted, by the way.
Well,
Hey, you know what? What I said was so good, I'm going to say it again. Just because. So, I gave it a green lightsaber. There's your Kyber crystal right there. Definitely, again, another great episode. More history there for our beloved now, Tusken Raiders and Boba himself. So, green for me.
real quick, a Jedi Master's green. Not much more of it I can add to this, guys. I fell in love with this show because it was different, from Ludwig Göransson's Native American sounding score to the more thoughtful Boba Fett characterizations. So as far as I'm concerned, keep them rolling. The only thing that could slow this down are candy-colored speeder bikes, but I mean, who's going to put that in a show, right? So in any event.
That just sounds silly. That'd be like adding the Power Rangers to Boba Fett. Pshaw.
No one's ever going to do that.
And with that, to all of our Padawan learners, Jedi Master friends, and others, may the Force be with you.
And with Lisa and Ethan.